Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over. You ask the questions and I give the answers, but I don't have all the answers. I'm no drugstore cowboy. So when I don't have answers, I offer opinions. And if I don't have an answer, I just say I don't know. Okay, before we go anywhere, are you reading My Sister Suprema? Why not? It's free. Anthony Gonzalez Clark is just killing it over there, taking my scripts and turning them into something absolutely marvelous. If you like sibling rivalry comedies and superheroes, this is the strip for you. So follow the link below and head on over to ArcTunes and read yourself some My Sister Suprema. First question, Dwayne Thomas. Given your great reverence for Steve Ditko, I have to ask, what did you think of his work at Charlton after he left Marvel, specifically his creation of Blue Beetle, The Question, and Captain Atom, his work for DC, specifically on Hawk and Dove and Beware the Creeper, his work on his return to Marvel, including Rom Space Knight and his creation of Speedball, finally on his final work, which would be characterized as a series of preachy objectivist rants. Preachy doesn't begin to describe it. Harangues would be more like it. Anyway, Blue Beetle was a Golden Age character, appeared in newspaper strips and comic strips. Charlton brought him back in the 60s. I'm sure Ditko had some input, but this was mostly Joe Gill's show. And so there's not a lot of Ditko stuff here. And I think at this point, Ditko was exhausted after his long run on Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Both creatively and physically and mentally. Just sort of is just a hired hand here. Same for Captain Atom, which I know was created by Joe Gill because I just read about the creation of the character in Ditko's own words. And Ditko admitting that he was just brought on to pencil and ink, not create. The question, yeah, that's Ditko. That's more Ditko. Although I believe these were often scripted by Joe Gill, if not occasionally Denny O'Neil. I'm not sure, as Sergius O'Shaughnessy. I'd have to look that up, which I was too lazy to do before this. But yeah, the question is closer to a classic Ditko character with the kind of look that really very few people could pull off, but it works within Ditko's version of reality. This blank face. I think Ditko was trying to say something here. And of course, we get to the objectivist stuff, which, I liked at first, and then it got, they stopped being crime stories and suspense stories of any kind and just turned into objectivist harangues. Now, as far as Hawk and Dove and the Creeper, both those series were kind of truncated. They started out well and then were taken over by other creators. The reason for this is because Ditko had tuberculosis and was suffering a long period of ill health then, and sadly, not only for his health but for us comic fans, he had to leave both Creeper and Hawk and the Dove. Both of which he had obviously had a big hand in helping to create. He comes back strong later. Working for DC and Marvel alternately. I didn't really follow Rom Space Knight or Speedball. I read some of his Starman stuff, and of course his wonderful inks over Wally Wood on The Stalker. But Ditko never recaptured that magic. I really think Spider-Man in particular broke him. He never really, he tried to bring it back with Creeper and Hawk and Dove and then suffered a health setback. And I just think that just put him back behind the eight ball for the rest of his career. And so he just amused himself drawing what he felt like drawing. And once again, being a hired hand. Although I do know when he made his return to Marvel, he told them he would not ever draw any of the characters he was most associated with. The Spider-Man characters or Doctor Strange characters. That was in the past for him. He would not do that again. And I kind of respect him for that because he got done over on that. There's no denying it that Steve Ditko got screwed. And even when I was a kid, I knew this. I intuited it somehow that my man, Steve Ditko, would never have left his signature titles unless it was under duress. And of course, I later found out I was right. Joshua Ignatowski, have you ever met Mark Hamill, and do you have another humorous story you'd like to tell us about him in addition to the ones about the answering machine and Michael Keaton's height? No, I never got to meet Mark Hamill. The guys at DC promised that the next time they knew he was going to be in town and they knew they were going to be seeing him, they would have me up. But sadly, that just never happened. I don't think he ever. If he did visit New York, I'm sure he did because he owned an incredible apartment, an incredible condo with a view of Central Park. In an old, an old building. An old stately, one of those amazing ex-hotels along the park. So, but sadly, that never happened. Quickly, for those who missed it, the Hamill story is that he told the guys at DC that when he heard Michael Keaton was cast as Batman, he thought, "Wow, I wanted to play Batman," and so he said, "I'm as tall as him." And so he went to a party with his wife that Michael Keaton was going to be at. And his wife finished the story for the guys and said, I couldn't find Mark. And I look out over the party and there he is standing as close as he can, back to back with Michael Keaton and gesturing to me, basically signing which one of us is taller. Apparently they're almost exactly the same height. And then the other story is that Mark Hamill famously at the time recorded an answering machine message as a surprise for Scott Peterson. He recorded an answering machine message as the Joker. And Scott thought it was wonderful at first until the phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing as word got around and everybody wanted to hear the answering machine message. And so his phone was constantly ringing, and then when he would go to pick it up, there would be nobody there. Another story the guys told me was that they visited his fabulous apartment, and they all said the same thing. It was three of the editors, Scott Peterson, Jordan Gorfinkel, and Darren Vincenzo. They all said the same thing. They had seen apartments like this in movies, but didn't know they existed in real life. So apparently it was a pretty freaking amazing apartment. So that's what Star Wars money will get for you. And it was around Christmas time. In fact, it was after Christmas. And they said, well, first of all, every time Mark would leave the room, like, to go get them a drink or answer a phone or something like that, they would, as soon as he left the room, I'll tell you that. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm keeping you hanging there, aren't I? And anyway, it was after Christmas, and Mark showed them his favorite Christmas gift that his wife had given him. And it was a really primo copy of Detective Comics number 38, the first appearance of Robin. And his wife said, there was one in better condition, but I didn't want to spend the extra $15,000. So we can only imagine what that cost. Now, what did the guys do when every time Mark Hamill left the room? They mimed his scene where he loses his hand in Empire Strikes Back. They would hold their wrists, and then mime, not actually shout out, but mime the no. That's a very geeky bunch of guys I used to work with, and I love them for it. But apparently, Hamill is just a super nice guy, super into comics, and one of us, for the most part. Hey, Ignatowski Twin Spin. Okay, what do we got up next here? If Graham Nolan gave you a cameo in a Sunshine State strip, which characters from the strip would you like to interact with? And would you be mocking Graham about being stuck in New York while you're living the good life in Florida? I've already mocked Graham in person. If you don't you got to check out Graham's Sunshine State strip. I'll try to provide a link below. If not, just Google it. Sunshine. It's not easy to say. Sunshine State, Graham Nolan, and it'll take you right there. And they're free, just like My Sister Supreme. You can read it for free. Years of these things. And it's a marvelous strip. A wonderful strip. It's kind of a water cooler strip, the kind of strip you see hung up on the refrigerator at offices. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just like to hang out with Mel and Dink. They like comic books, and we'd probably get along. And of course, I would mock Graham. But I have mocked Graham in reality. When I first moved down here to Tampa, I was down at the beach with my family, and it was the middle of February, and there was a blizzard in Buffalo, a famous blizzard that just shut the city down for like a whole week. And so I called Graham on my phone, and I didn't say anything. I just held the phone out to the surf. and when he answered, he knew who it was. And all I could hear from the cell phone over the surf was, "You son of a bitch." But that's one of the perks of living in Florida, is to make fun of everybody suffering the cold and wet, freezing weather of the north. It's just one of the many benefits and growing number of benefits of living here in Florida. JMB USA. For some bizarre reason, the primary thing at this very moment on my mind is whether or not you are at all familiar with the Dr. Sin stories. I find them to be an interesting lot, at the very least, with the foundational concept of it, with the swashbuckling and secret identities among the associated media. There is a decently fun film from the early 60s with Patrick McGoohan you may or may not have caught prior. Yeah, I know Dr. Sin. I mean, I remember The Scarecrow when I was a kid on Disney. They eventually released it as a feature film, but it first appeared as a 2 or 3 part series on The Wonderful World of Disney. And I dug it. You know, I already liked Patrick McGoohan. I'd seen him in Secret Agent Man and stuff like that. And who wouldn't? What's not to like? It's a swashbuckling adventure story set along the Cornwall coast of England, filmed there, and with an entirely English cast, and lots of shooting and fighting and riding horses. And he's kind of like a 18th century version of Batman. And it was all about the smuggling business of the period, which if you ever read about it, it's freaking fascinating. The robust, the shipwreckers and smugglers all along the English coast, particularly areas like Cornwall. These desolate coastline where smugglers often cruelly would drive ships up on the rocks. Although in The Scarecrow, I believe the smugglers are portrayed as heroes because they're rebelling against the crown, which I guess is why Disney thought it would be a good series for the United States. But yeah, I am familiar with it. I've never read the books that it's based on, and I don't think I've ever read the comic books. But I'm gonna have to amend that. I'm gonna have to pick up the Dr. Sin novel, or I don't know, maybe there's a few of them. But cool reference. I love it. Andrew Venables. Either from your own work or someone else's, what are some of your favorite single panels in comics, and what makes them so fantastic? I couldn't find the panel, and I couldn't find the comic. But this issue of Legends of the DC Universe, number 6, has a story I've often referenced by Kelly Puckett, and it goes back to tell the first meeting between Dick Grayson, Robin, and Superman, and it's this great story. It's got and Robin is just so awestruck and starstruck by Superman, and he's also touched by the idea that Superman he's just a regular guy, he can be funny, and they form kind of a bond between them. And when Dick Grayson or Robin returns to the Batcave, he's just all, I met Superman and he's fantastic. You know about Superman? And there's this absolutely awesome panel where Batman says, and I'm paraphrasing, remember, he's not human. And it's just it was one of those, I want to bang my head on my desk. Why did I ever think of that? What a great line. It sums up so much about Batman that, he doesn't trust anybody. He doesn't give anyone the shadow of the doubt, even Superman. Now, another panel that I've often, or actually series of panels, is from the very first appearance in Thor of the High Evolutionary. And the High Evolutionary, as many of you know, was a character created by Kirby who would take animals and basically drag them up the evolutionary chain closer to humankind. And in this amazing story, we see the first result of this. And I just love this progression. You know, I live, I feel, and I hate. I mean, you knew, wow, next issue, this is going to kick ass next issue. So those are two I can think of. Maybe I'll make this a feature where I'll feature favorite panels from the past as I run across them again. But those are two I remember well. And if anybody can find that panel from Legends of the DCU #6, share it. Send it to me at BrunoBookstore.com. Venable gets a twin spin. Look at that. He's so proud. I'm always fascinated that both yourself and Mike Barron say the Punisher is one character you'd like to continue to write. So much so, I think both of you have created similar characters to scratch that itch. Yes, we have. Though I dig the skull and big guns, I feel I'm missing out on why some really love him. What is it that makes writing Frank Castle so appealing? What sets him apart from other vigilante characters and prevents him from being superseded by other creations? I think it's, you know, he's not that different than other vigilante characters. But under, prior creators, he's kind of molded and changed and evolved and finally takes his final form when Mike Barron writes him. And Mike Barron sort of fills in the spaces. You know, he fills in all of the questions. Who is Frank Castle? Why does he do this? What's he really like? And we find out he's really not a nice person. You know, who could be? Does what he does for a living. And he does it for a living. I think Mike's the first person to introduce that he financed his war on crime using money from criminals. Because Mike's a logistics guy like I am. It's like, it's not enough. Well, how does he afford all these guns and this and that? He's using that coke money, man, that yayo money, and money he takes from mobsters, and he's arming himself up. He's weaponizing that cash right back in their faces, and I thought that was cool. He doesn't have any moral compunctions about that. In fact, Frank has very few moral compunctions, which kind of separates him from other vigilantes. Other vigilantes have a crowd, ensemble, and they're loyal to them and everything else. Frank has an ensemble that's loyal to him, but he's not loyal to them in the least bit, which makes him absolutely fascinating. He's much closer to the character in Brian Garfield's Death Wish novels than he is to any costume crime fighter. And what makes it irresistible to write is because he's like a force of nature. I mean, I see stuff in the news, I see stuff in newspaper and stuff like that all the time that, man, this would be such a great Punisher story. I wish I was still writing the Punisher. And yeah, Mike has created most recently Private Citizen, and I have my Levon Cade novels, which kind of let us dip into this milieu a bit. But yeah, we both miss Frank. And truth to tell, I think Frank misses us. Gentle Savage. Mr. Dixon, aside from Bane being inspired by Doc Savage, who were some of the other characters you created inspired by? For example, Torque, Spoiler, etc. Bane is kind of a mix of different characters, much like Batman is. It starts with he's an evil Doc Strange because he had to be Doc Savage because he had to be Batman's intellectual and physical equal. And Batman is very much like Doc Savage in that aspect where he has perfected himself. And Bane has perfected himself for evil. But another aspect, another thing I kind of borrowed from was Alexander Dumas' classic Man in the Iron Mask. Man in the Iron Mask is about the French Dauphin, the true heir to the French throne, is locked away in a horrible prison by bad guys, and obviously bad guys, and he's welded into an iron mask so that no one will ever know his identity. Nobody will ever know who he is. And he's, I believe, eventually rescued by the Three Musketeers. Dumas would have been a hell of a comic book writer. He wrote all kinds of crossovers and sequels and things like that. So a bit of Bane comes from the Dumas story, because obviously the Dauphin is imprisoned in a horrible prison, even though he's innocent of any crime. And he comes out the other end, understandably vengeful. As a side note, and a total tangent, you people seem to like these tangents, I wanted to do a direct Man in the Iron Mask story with Bane, featuring Bane, as part of a series of Batman pirate stories, which were really popular at the time. As I explained in an earlier video, that spawned their own toy line at Kenner. I mean, DC had every reason to be pleased with it. But I only ever got to do Detective Annual 7 and one 10-page story in Batman Chronicles. And I really wanted to do a few more. I wanted to do the Bane Man in the Iron Mask. I wanted to do one with Poison Ivy and Riddler. And I kept saying, look, if you let me and Kike Alcatena do a few more of these, there'll be enough for a trade paperback. So you can have a Batman pirate trade paperback. How awesome would that be? And apparently they didn't think it would be terribly awesome. So now my inspiration for a spoiler was she was a plot device. There was no real inspiration. I didn't see her as an ongoing character. I didn't create Stephanie Brown to ever appear again, other than in the arc she was in. And she was a gimmick, a plot device. She was Cluemaster's daughter, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny that the daughter of a comic book villain rebelled against him? And of course, by her form of rebellion would take fighting crime, particularly her father's crimes. And I really didn't think she would ever appear again, but you never know. You never know what's going to click with comic fans. Silver Surfer was created so Galactus had someone to talk to. And when readers demanded that we bring Spoiler back, actually they just expected her to return. Then I had to start thinking about, what's her real deal? What's she like? I have to add some depth to this character. And I think I achieved that because she remains popular. So I kind of delivered on that promise to myself mostly, and created a character that I probably have the most affinity for. The one of all the characters I've created, she's the one I like the most as a person. Now, Torque was Dudley Soames. Dudley Soames was unashamedly inspired by a detective character in James Ellroy novels, most prominently in L.A. Confidential. If you saw the movies, he's the character, the Irish brogue character that James Cromwell plays. And I was very much going for a kind of a Ellroy feel on the crime end and cop end of the Nightwing stuff, because I was reading a lot of Ellroy at the time. So it sort of seeped in, and so I created Dudley Soames, but I always knew that I wanted to turn him into a villain. He was a cop, a bad cop, but I wanted to turn him into an actual villain. And I thought, well, his gimmick will be that Blockbuster's finally tired of his crap and machinations and tries to kill him by breaking his neck, turning his head around backwards. And but somehow, miraculously, Dudley survives this and takes on the persona of Torque. And he not only continues the backwards theme by having his head on backwards, but he also uses palindromes, or words and sentences that read the same backwards as forwards, as part of his clues, as part of his whatever he's up to. Because he's obviously nuts. I mean, he got his head turned backwards. You'd be crazy too. Now, speaking of inspiration, I love this story. Peter O'Donnell created Modesty Blaze, both as a comic strip character, and he wrote a series of novels. If you've never read the Modesty Blaze novels and you like a good thriller, you've got to find them. They are fantastic. They are terrific. Sort of Ian Fleming with just terrific situations and characters, and especially the character relationship between Modesty and Willie. I mean, the comic strip's good. It's fine. It's fun. But the novels are a real experience. And I urge you to find them. And Peter O'Donnell's, I watched a documentary in which Peter O'Donnell was an interview in which he talked about the creation of Modesty Blaze. And he said that it all began, he was in World War II, he was somewhere in the Middle East. And it was the closing days of World War II. And if you don't know, at the end of World War II, everyone in Europe was starving. Infrastructure was gone. Crops weren't being grown. Everything was interrupted by World War II. And the end result was that everyone was hungry. I mean, people starved to death in their millions after World War II. Now, the United States was there, and we rescued Europe from, being decimated, literally, by famine. But in this interview, O'Donnell tells a story about how he's on an army truck, he's in uniform, and they're rolling through some blasted town, some town that's just, fallen down. A lot of people are either gone or have been killed. And he sees standing in the ruins this young girl, and she's like 8 or 9 years old. And she's obviously malnourished. She's gaunt. And she has eyes, the eyes of a person much older than herself because of everything she's seen and everything she's suffered. And he talks about this, and O'Donnell begins to cry as he remembers this. And he thought, years later, when he had to create like a thriller character, action adventure hero, he thought, well, why not a woman? And why not that girl? What kind of woman would, if that girl got to grow up, what kind of woman would that girl grow up to be? And of course, that's the origin of Modesty Blaze. So Modesty Blaze is an orphan and a waif. She's starving. She turns to thievery and then builds herself up to where she has her own crime network, and eventually retires from that and comes over to the side of the Angels to fight a lot of the bad guys that she used to run with. So I've always thought that's a heck of a story of inspiration, better than any of mine. Brett Cherubini. I just finished reading issues 1-7 of Alias Black and White. Now I see that Mickey wasn't the first Fandazi you wrote. I also noticed that Dixon reality flyer in one of the issues. Anyway, in episode 108 of Ask Chuck Dixon, you mentioned that Antarctic was publishing the finished product of Alias. Will that be more than issues 1-7? I hope Neil is able to take down Gus, or Tracy's dad is able to kill him. Also finished reading Iron Ghost. I did not see that twist coming. Good job on both of those stories. Alias, it's Alias 1-7. That's it. That's all we did. And it's all available now through Antarctic in individual issues, reproduced in black and white from the originals. I still have all the originals for this series, drawn by the amazing Todd Fox, inked by the equally incredible Enrique Villagran. It is a crime epic. Will this maniac ever get caught? I don't know. And thanks for the kind words on Iron Ghost. In case you don't know, if you've never read Iron Ghost, it is a whodunit mystery. It's about a mass vigilante in the last days of the Third Reich, but it's also a whodunit. Okay. Josh Reed. Do you have a favorite Universal monster movie? My personal favorite is Dracula, but Creature from the Black Lagoon is a close second. It'll always be Wolfman for me. It's my favorite Universal monster. I love Wolfman. I love Lon Chaney as Wolfman. I love everything about Wolfman. And as Warren Zevon said, I'd like to meet his tailor, because I always thought, even when I was a kid, I wasn't very clothes conscious as a kid, but I thought, man, that Lon Chaney, he's a sharp dresser. Particularly in Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, where he wears a dark shirt with a white tie, and this awesome tweed sport coat. And when I was a kid, I was like, "Oh, Mom, I want a black shirt and a white tie, to go to church." And she's like, "No, that's what gangsters wear. You're not wearing that." And of course, this version of the Wolfman gives us one of Abbott and Costello's best retorts, where Lon Chaney's trying to explain that at the full moon, every full moon, I turn into a wolf. And to which Bud or Lou says, you and 50 million other guys. It's a great delivery from both of them. Chaney so impassioned and Lou so dismissive, perfectly comically timed. But Wolfman was my favorite. I bought all the Aurora model kits. They were 98 cents at my hobby store, but my favorite above all was the Wolfman. I think I repainted him dozens of times as I came up with different ideas for color schemes and how to do the fur and everything else. But the Wolfman. I wanted to be the Wolfman. I wanted to be a werewolf. I thought that was kind of cool. Everybody afraid of you for a few days a month, and then you go back to normal. Seemed like a good part-time gig. Scaring people for a couple of days of the month. Danny Brown, one of my favorite one and dones was a bullet for Bullock. It made me like him more. He's walking down the street, gets shot at, fires back, and continues to walk down the street. Doesn't call for backup or nothing. How is that? How is it that he can chase criminals around Gotham and still manage to find a donut to eat? Was it as fun for you writing it as it was for me reading it? If you've never read Bullet for Bullock, I can't read the number on this Detective Comics, but it's one of the one and dones that Graham and I did. Sometimes we had to do the one and dones so that they would fit around crossovers and things like that. But as when we first got on the book, we were already dedicated to doing standalone stories for our own amusement. We both recalled the amazing standalone stories that Will Eisner would do back in the day on the Spirit. I mean, the most memorable Spirit stories are those ones like 10 minutes and stories like that began and ended and finished up in 8 or 10 pages and were indelibly etched on your mind for the rest of your life. And great standalone stuff from Kirby and Ditko back in the day on FF and Spider-Man and things like that. So we kind of wanted to pay homage to that. And this was early on the run. Graham had joined me on Detective after Mike Netzer left. And, it was fun writing a straight up, crime story with Harvey Bullock that was, I think a little bit different than the kind of stories he had done before, as he becomes the target of a mysterious killer who wants Harvey dead, and so he and Batman lie to basically go through the Gotham underworld like crap through a goose, trying to find out who it is that wants Harvey dead. And for once, Batman's got it wrong. He didn't. It's a mystery he does not solve. Neither does Harvey Bullock. It's a mystery kind of, well, I won't ruin it for you. But the coolest thing about this story, other than, we really dug doing it, was that it got adapted into a standalone episode of Batman the Animated Adventures. And it's pretty much exactly the way that Graham and I presented it. Except, of course, they had to, the story didn't lend itself to a full 30-minute telling, this 22-page story. So they had to add a couple of minor subplots and things like that to expand the running time. But the coolest thing was they turned the mobster in the story. They modeled him after Lee Marvin from Point Blank. And I thought, wow, that is so very cool. So thanks for the mention of Bullet for Bullock. If you ever want to read a good, solid, standalone Batman mystery, check that one out. Ace Mowick. During your time at Marvel, did you have to attend one of Jim Shooter's $1.98 storytelling lectures, or did you at least hear the meat and potatoes of it from someone who did, and what did you think of it? I heard a lot of grousing about it. Shooter had some very definite ideas about particularly visual storytelling. Mostly he was about changing up angles, and pulling the camera back, basically, telling stories the Marvel Comics way. But some artists weren't doing it, and he didn't care for some of the fancy schmancy kind of chaotic page layouts some of the artists were doing. And quite frankly, some of the newer artists at Marvel who were less experienced were doing these more crazy page layouts to hide their own deficiencies. That they weren't really good at composing panels, and so they would use oddly shaped panels and odd configurations in order to hide that fact. A lot of overlapping characters and things like that. And Jim didn't care for that stuff. You can see an example of that when he goes over and basically founds Valiant Comics, and all the stuff he wrote, and I think all of Valiant's output in that period was grid fashion, 6-panel grids, 4-panel grids, 8-panel grids. I love that stuff myself. That's pure comics to me. So I agree with Jim in that aspect. He had some other prejudices against certain kinds of angle shots, certain kinds of panels, which that was his thing, man. I mean, I don't like circular panels. So he was the boss, so he got to make the rules. But no, I never attended one of these classes because I was over in Larry Hama's corner of the bullpen, literally corner office. Jim Shooter had nothing to do with anything Larry was doing, and any tutelage I needed in storytelling, I was going to get from Larry anyway, and did. Larry was a terrific teacher, terrific mentor, and by terrific teacher, I mean he was like a headmaster from an English public school. He learned to teach creators from Wally Wood, who was his mentor, and he often told the story that he would ask Wally, because he worked with Wally Wood as an assistant in Wally Wood's studio for quite a while, and he asked Wally, how am I doing? Am I getting any better? Am I done? And Wally's answer was always, I'll tell you when you stop sucking. And that sort of Larry kind of took on that style. So that's sort of acidic style. Now, of course, I did was over at DC. They had me take the Bob McKee course, story structure course. Bob McKee is a TV writer who had these seminars, these weekend-long seminars. And Denny O'Neil had taken it, Archie Goodwin had taken it. They urged all of the other DC editors to take it. And then when I started working full-time for DC, they suggested I take it as well. And DC pay for it. Not only pay for the course, which was rather expensive at the time, but also pay to put me up in New York for the weekend. So I'm like, a weekend in New York? Great. What I didn't know is that the McKee course was a freaking boot camp. You didn't get any free time. You basically listened to Bob McKee talk for, 10 to 11 hours and then went back to your hotel room and fell on your bed. Your mind a whirl with all of the stuff he had put in it. And but it was good because the whole idea was that Archie and Denny particularly were really adamant about everybody taking these courses. It was that we have like a shared language, and I saw the value in that because McKee did articulate things about being a writer, about the writing process that I sort of intuited but never put into words. And he also had a lot to say on various aspects of character development and things like that, things I'd simply never thought of. Some of it I was intuiting as a writer. Some of it I was just doing blindly without really realizing it. Dick Giordano once said, he was critiquing an artist's portfolio and I was watching it. And he said, the difference between a professional and an amateur is an amateur will do something really good by accident. Like he'll do a piece of artwork and, oh, wow, that turned out just the way I wanted it to. And he goes, a professional produces that work on purpose. And so you've got to learn how to do that. How do I make it the way I want it? What elements have to be put in? And McKee helped with that. the few things I disagree with him on, but no writer's ever going to never going to agree 100% with any other writer. But for the most part, I got a lot out of it, and I'm really glad that DC insisted I go. And it was a memorable weekend, to say the least. Mr. McKee is quite the character. If you ever see the movie adaptation with Nick Cage, McKee is played by Brian Cox, and it couldn't have been better casting to cast the first Hannibal Lecter as Bob McKee. Hey, if you want to reach me with questions, answers, pictures of kitty cats, doggies, whatever, contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. I check it religiously every day. And while we're at it, Spin Rack is on Discord. Now, if you don't know Discord, it's a community where you get to share ideas and communicate and hang out and everything else, and totally interactive. But the thing about Spin Rack is we have a section for wannabe artists and writers, inkers, letterers, and the benefit of going there, if you're a wannabe, if you want to get in this business, is that Graham and I are there, and we offer our advice, and we offer tutelage. There are tryout scripts, scripts that are written to be tryout scripts for wannabe pencilers, and some people have taken us up on that. We're seeing some pretty promising stuff over there, but not enough people know about it. We need to grow the community. So if you're looking to get into comics and you're looking for direct contact with two guys who have a lot of experience in comics, and we have more guys coming. Mike Barron has shown up there a couple of times. Check out Spin Rack at Discord, and you might learn something. Or, hey, we might learn something from you. So anyway, I want to say thanks for the likes, and please like. Please hit that like button. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button. It helps me. My subscription list is growing, and it helps spread the word about this channel. I think there's a lot of people who would like this channel. They just don't know about it. And, thanks for listening, watching, or however you enjoyed this, and I will see all of you down the road.